My brother-in-law shoved me into the wall of my own kitchen and told me I was worthless. I didn't say a word. 3 days later, I handed him a folder. He thought it was the loan paperwork he'd been demanding for 6 months. He actually smiled. Until he opened it. I was sorting through Miriam's recipe cards when the doorbell rang. She kept them in an old wooden box, her handwriting on each one. Precise and small, the way everything about her was precise and small. Beef stew, lemon pound cake. The corn chowder she made every November without fail. I'd been meaning to organize them for 8 months. 8 months since the funeral. Still hadn't gotten through the box. The doorbell rang again. My brother-in-law stood on the porch with his wife behind him. That alone told me something. Nadine never came to these visits. She'd call. She'd send cards at Christmas, but she left the in-person requests to her husband. Her being there meant the number was bigger than usual. Come in. I stepped back. I'll make coffee. We don't need coffee. He was already past me. Already in my living room. Already claiming the center of it the way he always did. This won't take long. He sat in my armchair. The one I sit in. I took the couch. Nadine perched on the edge of the cushion beside me like she wasn't sure she was allowed to be there. Walt, he said, using my name the way people use a tool, I've got a situation. My brother-in-law's name is Roland. He married Miriam's younger sister 31 years ago. Back then he was likable enough. Coached Little League, told decent jokes, showed up to things. Somewhere in the last decade, that version of him had been replaced by someone else entirely. Someone who saw family as a resource to be managed. What kind of situation? I said. Business. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, the posture of a man who has rehearsed sincerity. I've got a distribution contract, regional, good margins, but I need operating capital to bridge the next 90 days. 30,000. I looked at Nadine. She was studying the carpet. Roland, I said, you still owe me 14,000 from the last bridge. Those were different circumstances. They were the same circumstances. You needed money. I gave it to you. You didn't pay it back. His jaw tightened. His fingers pressed flat against his thighs. I've known Roland for 31 years. I know what his face looks like when he's deciding whether to keep performing patience or abandon it. He abandoned it. You're sitting in this house, he said, that Miriam's family helped you buy. You've got her life insurance, her pension, her savings. Meanwhile, Nadine and I are struggling, and you're organizing recipe cards. I set down the card in my hand. Lemon pound cake, Miriam's mother's recipe. I'd like you to leave, I said. He stood. Not to leave. To loom. Roland is 6'2" and he uses it. You think you can just say no. He took 2 steps toward me. You think because she's gone, you don't owe this family anything anymore. I stood up. Slower than him, stiffer. I'm 67 years old and my left hip has been complaining since February. But I stood. I don't owe you $30,000, I said. I don't owe you anything. He shoved me. Both hands hard center of the chest. I hit the kitchen door frame on my way back. My shoulder took most of it. I grabbed the frame to keep from going down. Nadine made a sound I've never heard her make before. Something between a gasp and a word that didn't form. Roland, she said. Roland, stop. He pointed at me. You'll regret this. We're family and you're going to regret treating us like this. Then they left. I stood at the kitchen door frame for a while. Tested my shoulder. Moved it in circles. Bruised, maybe worse. But everything still worked. Through the window I could see Roland's truck backing out of the driveway too fast. Clipping the edge of my mailbox post on the way out, I went to the freezer. Found a bag of peas. Pressed it to my shoulder and stood at the counter where Miriam used to stand when she made the corn chowder, looking out at the backyard. My neighbor across the fence, a retired postal worker named Clement, was raking leaves in his yard. He stopped, looked over. We made eye contact. He'd seen Roland's truck leave. His expression asked a question I wasn't ready to answer yet. I went to my desk. Opened the drawer where I keep things I don't want to lose. Found the card my daughter had given me last Christmas. On the back, she'd written a name and number. Mom would want me to give you this. He helped us when we had the problem with the contractor. Don't be stubborn. The name was Bernard Cho, attorney. I called him at 4 in the afternoon. His assistant put me through immediately, which surprised me. Mr. Cho, I said, my brother-in-law shoved me into a doorframe this morning in my own house. I have a bruised shoulder, and I think my neighbor may have witnessed part of it. I need to know what my options are. He asked me 3 questions. Was I injured? Had I documented it? Was there any video? Yes, probably, and I wasn't sure. That third one sent me back to the drawer. I'd had a security system installed after a break-in 2 blocks over last spring. My daughter had insisted. The technician had mounted a camera at the front door and one at the back, plus a small unit in the living room that I'd mostly forgotten about. I pulled up the app on my phone, scrolled to that morning, found the timestamp. The living room camera had caught everything. Roland in my armchair, the conversation. Him stepping toward me. The shove, my shoulder hitting the frame. Nadine's face. I watched it 3 times. My hands were steady by the 3rd viewing. I called Bernard Cho back. I have video, I said. All of it. His response was immediate. Send it to me now. Don't post it anywhere. Don't show it to anyone else yet. And Mr. Hargrove, don't contact your brother-in-law. I wrote down that last part on a notepad and put it on the counter where I'd see it. I did not contact Roland. He contacted me. 17 times in the next 48 hours. Texts that started apologetic and ended threatening. You know I didn't mean it that way. Can we talk like adults? You're blowing this out of proportion. You'll destroy Nadine's life over nothing. I know lawyers too. I forwarded everything to Bernard. Each one. He replied once. Good. Keep forwarding. I went to urgent care the next morning. The shoulder was badly bruised. Possible minor separation. They weren't certain without more imaging. They documented everything. Gave me a folder with photos and a written report. I added it to the pile growing on my desk. Clement knocked on my door that afternoon. He's not a man who knocks unless he means to. Retired from 30 years with the Postal Service, built like someone who carried heavy things for a long time. He stood on my porch with his rake still in his hand. Walt, he said, I saw some of what happened yesterday. The truck leaving fast. You at the window. Are you all right? It wasn't really a question. Clement asks questions when he doesn't know the answer. He already knew I wasn't entirely all right. I told him briefly. He listened the way good listeners do, without filling the spaces. If you need me to say what I saw, he said, I will. Simple as that. I thanked him. Went inside. Called Bernard. I have a neighbor witness. Saw the truck leave, saw my face at the window afterward. That's corroboration, Bernard said. Confirms timeline, confirms your state. It's not the video, but it supports it. Good. 3 days after the shove, Roland texted again. Different tone. Softer. I've been thinking. I overreacted, and I'm sorry. Can I come by, just to clear the air? I have something for you. I showed Bernard. He wants to assess what you know, Bernard said. Don't meet him at your house. Don't meet him at all. If he shows up, don't open the door. I replied to Roland, I'll be in touch soon. I have something for you too. That was all I wrote. Bernard filed the paperwork the following week. Criminal complaint, assault, and battery. The process server delivered it to Roland's house on a Tuesday morning. Roland called me 11 times that afternoon. I watched the phone ring and didn't pick up. Then a text, what is this? This is insane. You're filing criminal charges over a push. I watched his contact name appear and disappear on my screen 3 times as he typed and deleted things. Then, wait until Nadine finds out what you've done to her. I set the phone down. Picked up the lemon pound cake card. Read Miriam's handwriting. Put it back in the box. The next call wasn't from Roland. It was from Nadine. Walt. Her voice sounded like she'd been crying for an hour. Walt, I need to talk to you. Nadine, I said. He said you're filing charges. Criminal charges. Yes. Walt. He'll... She stopped. Started again. This will destroy everything. He could go to prison. I can't do this alone. Nadine, I said carefully. Where were you when he shoved me? Silence. You were standing right there. You saw it. I know. Did you try to stop him? Another silence. Longer. I didn't know what to do, she said. I froze. I know. I'm not angry at you, she said. I froze. I know. I'm not angry at you, but I need you to understand that what he did was not a push. What he did was assault in my own home, with you standing there. And he did it because I wouldn't give him money that I don't owe him. She was crying now. She'd been crying since she called. He does this, Walt. Her voice dropped so low I had to press the phone to my ear. Not just to you. It's been going on for a long time. I don't know what to do about it. I held the phone and said nothing for a moment. Nadine, I said finally, I think you do know what to do. I think you've known for a while. The question is whether you're ready. She hung up. I sat there. Thought about Miriam. They'd grown up in the same house, Miriam and Nadine, different in almost every way, but close. The kind of close that only happens when you share a childhood. Miriam had worried about her sister for years, never said it directly, but I'd seen it in the way she looked at Nadine sometimes. A particular quiet concern. I hoped I'd said the right thing. My daughter called that evening. She'd heard from a cousin, who'd heard from someone at a family gathering that Roland was talking, telling a version of events that had very little to do with what the camera had actually recorded. Dad, she said, are you okay? Really? I'm okay, I said. Really? Should I come home? Not yet. But soon, 2 weeks before the court date, Bernard called me to his office. He had something to tell me, and he wanted to do it in person. That phrasing alone put a cold feeling in my stomach. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a printed email chain. The sender was Roland. The recipients included 2 of Miriam's cousins and my brother on her side, a man named Abelard who lives in Phoenix and who I have always respected enormously. I read it slowly. Roland had written to them 6 weeks before he came to my house. Before the shove. Before the $30,000 ask, he told them Miriam's estate had been mismanaged, that there were questions about how I'd handled her accounts, that the family might want to consider whether someone should look into it. There were no questions about the estate. Everything was documented. Everything was in order. Everything had gone through probate without a single issue. But Roland had planted the seed anyway. Just questions. Just wondering. Concern for the family. 2 of the cousins had written back asking for more details. Abelard had written back and said, I know, Walt. This doesn't sound right. I looked up from the folder. Where did you get this? I said. Nadine, Bernard said simply. She found it in his email. She forwarded it to me last night. I put the folder down, looked out Bernard's window at the parking structure across the street. He was laying groundwork, I said, in case I pushed back on the loan. He was already planning to discredit me. That's how I read it, Bernard said. Had he done this before? Was there a pattern? Bernard leaned back. That's actually what I wanted to discuss. Nadine shared some other things, going back further. He slid a second folder across. This one had financial records. Nadine's records, a home equity loan she'd taken out 3 years ago, without fully understanding the terms because Roland had handled all the paperwork. A joint account that had been drained and refilled and drained again in ways that followed Roland's business cycles. not their household needs, credit cards open in her name, for expenses she hadn't authorized. And then one more thing. A letter. Handwritten. On Miriam's stationery. The kind she kept in the drawer of her writing desk. The pale blue paper with her initials in the corner. My handwriting went cold. "Bernard," I said, "I know. The letter was in Miriam's handwriting, but the words were not Miriam's. Anyone who'd been married to her for 34 years would know. The cadences were wrong. The phrasing was wrong. My wife had an English teacher's precision with language. Whoever had written this letter had tried to approximate her voice and gotten close, but not close enough. The letter said she had wanted Roland and Nadine to have a portion of her personal savings after she passed. That she'd discussed it with me, and I'd agreed that the amount was $25,000. That I knew where it was and would honor her wishes. There was no such conversation. There were no such wishes. Miriam's will was explicit and had been written with an estate attorney and had nothing in it about Roland. He was going to use this, I said. At some point, he was holding it. As leverage or as a lawsuit, Bernard said. One or the other. I sat with that for a long time. Then I asked the question I needed to ask. How long has he been doing this to other people? Bernard opened a third folder. There was a man in Cleveland, a former business partner who'd invested $60,000 in a logistics startup that Roland had dissolved after 18 months, paying himself a consulting fee before the dissolution that equaled most of the remaining capital. The partner had sued. Roland had countersued. They'd settled, confidentiality agreement. The partner walked away with less than a third of what he'd put in. There was a woman in our own city, a widow like me. She'd met Roland through a church group 2 years after her husband died. He'd helped her with some paperwork. In the process, he'd been named a financial advisor on 2 of her accounts. She'd lost $38,000 before her son noticed the withdrawals and intervened. She had not pressed charges. She'd been too embarrassed. And there was Abelard's wife. Nadine had found emails between Roland and my brother-in-law's cousin about a real estate deal that had never existed. They'd been planning to approach Abelard and his wife. Planning it for months. The emails were dated 4 months before Miriam died. While my wife was sick, I said. Bernard didn't answer. He didn't need to. I drove home through the afternoon, parked in my driveway, and sat in the car. Clement was on his porch, reading. He looked up, raised a hand. I raised mine back. Normal. Everything looked normal from the outside. Inside, I was thinking about Miriam's stationery, the pale blue paper, her initials in the corner. She'd been so precise about her things. She would have been furious. She would have been precise and quiet and furious in that particular way she had. I went inside, called my daughter. I need you to come home, I said. Not for the court date, just to be here. I'll explain when you get here. She was at my door by 9 the next morning. I spread everything on the dining room table. The email chain, Nadine's financial records, the forged letter, the Cleveland partner, the widow from the church group. She sat across from me and read each document without speaking. When she finished, she was very still. Dad, she said, how long has he been doing this? I don't know exactly. Years. She looked at the letter on Miriam's stationery, her mother's initials in the corner. He forged Mom's handwriting. Yes. She didn't say anything else for a while. Nadine is still with him, I said. She gave Bernard these documents, but she's still in the house. My daughter looked up. Why? I don't know. Fear, maybe. Or she's not ready. Or both. We need to tell Abelard, she said. I'd already drafted the email. We sent it together. Abelard called within the hour. He's a man of few words, always has been, but the few he used were direct and unambiguous. He was angry. He would testify to receiving Roland's emails if asked. He would help however he could. I forwarded all of it to Bernard. The court date fell on a cold Thursday in March. Same month, Roland had come to my house demanding $30,000. It had a kind of symmetry that Miriam would have appreciated. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, hard benches. Bernard sat beside me. My daughter sat behind us. Clement sat 2 rows back in a charcoal blazer I had never seen him wear. He'd insisted on coming. I hadn't argued. Roland sat across the aisle with his attorney. He was wearing a suit I recognized. He'd worn it to Miriam's funeral. That detail landed somewhere I didn't expect. The judge entered. The room stood. The prosecutor presented the video first. The lights dimmed. The footage played on a screen at the front of the room, and I watched the people watching it, the jury watching Roland's posture shift to my living room, watching him stand, watching him cover the distance between us, watching my shoulder hit the frame. Clean, unambiguous. Roland staring at the table. The medical documentation came next. The injury report. The photos, then the text messages, all of them, scrolling through on the screen. The apologetic ones and the threatening ones and the calculated in-between ones. Clement testified. He'd seen the truck leave. He'd seen me at the window. He described my expression in precise postal worker language, the kind of language that doesn't embellish, and that restraint made it more convincing than any drama would have. Roland's attorney tried to frame it as a domestic misunderstanding, a family argument that escalated. My client acknowledges that the situation became physical, but the judge's expression did not change and did not invite the rest of that sentence to continue. Then Bernard stood. Your Honor, we have an additional witness who has asked to testify. Roland's attorney objected immediately. Disclosure requirements. Proper notice. The procedural language coming fast. The witness is the defendant's wife, Bernard said. She is listed as a material witness to the event. Nadine walked in from the side door. She was wearing a gray dress. Her hair was pulled back simply. She looked like she hadn't slept well in weeks. She probably hadn't. Roland's face did something I had never seen it do. The calculated confidence collapsed entirely, just for a moment, before the attorney leaned in and he assembled something else in its place. Nadine sat in the witness chair. Her hands were folded in her lap. She looked at me once, briefly. Then she looked at the prosecutor. Mrs. Andrade, were you present on the morning of February 14th when your husband and the victim were involved in a physical altercation? Yes. Can you describe what you witnessed? She described it exactly as it happened. Roland's posture. My refusal. His standing. The shove. My shoulder hitting the frame. She did not soften it, did not qualify it, did not look at her husband while she spoke. Why are you testifying today? The prosecutor asked. She was quiet for a moment. Because I watched it happen and I didn't stop it, she said. And I have watched things happen for a long time without stopping them. I'm done watching. Roland's attorney cross-examined her sharply. She answered each question in the same even tone. When he suggested her testimony was motivated by the divorce proceedings she had recently initiated, she said yes, the two things are related, and that doesn't make either one of them less true. I heard someone behind me exhale. The verdict came before 3 in the afternoon. Guilty, assault, and battery. The sentencing came 30 minutes after. Suspended sentence, conditional on completion of a court-mandated behavioral intervention program. Restitution. A restraining order, 200 yards, valid for 3 years, and a note from the judge, delivered in the clipped language of someone who has seen too many rooms like this one, that the court would be referring several of the financial documents entered into evidence to the district attorney's office for review. That last part, that was the part Roland hadn't expected. He was still standing at the defense table, his attorney speaking into his ear when I walked out into the hallway. My daughter took my arm. Clement walked beside us, his charcoal blazer catching the fluorescent light. We stood by the windows overlooking the parking structure. My daughter didn't say anything. Neither did I. Clement said, "You did right, Walt." I nodded. We drove home separately. I sat in my car in the driveway for a few minutes before going in. The mailbox post Roland had clipped on his way out 6 weeks ago was still slightly bent. I kept forgetting to straighten it. I went inside, made coffee, put Miriam's recipe box on the counter. My phone rang. "Nadine." I answered. She was very quiet on the other end. I waited. "I'm staying at my sister's," she said. "Not Miriam's side. Mine." "Okay," I said. "I'm sorry it took me so long." "I know." Another silence. "He forged her letter, Walt. That's the part that..." She stopped. "That's the part I can't. I can't." "I know," I said. She was crying, but quietly. The kind of crying you do when you've already cried most of it out. And this is what's left. We stayed on the phone without speaking for a while. I looked at Miriam's recipe box. After Nadine hung up, I opened it. Took out the lemon pound cake card. Read the instructions in Miriam's handwriting. The real one. Precise and small. Every detail exact. Because that was how she did things. The oven temperature. The cooling time. The note at the bottom, in slightly smaller writing. Don't rush the cooling. Or it cracks. 6 weeks later, my daughter was sitting on my kitchen counter watching me measure flour. "You're actually making it," she said. I said I'd make it. I handed her the card. She read it, the way you read something you want to memorize. "She looks like herself here," she said. "The handwriting. That's because it is her," I said. "That's the real thing." She set the card down carefully. Roland's attorney had filed an appeal the week before. Bernard said it wouldn't succeed. The DA's office had opened a separate investigation into the financial documents. The widow from the church group had retained her own attorney. The Cleveland partner had called Bernard directly to ask whether his settlement could be revisited. None of it was finished. It probably wouldn't be finished for a long time. The lemon pound cake took 50 minutes. I didn't rush the cooling. My daughter ate 2 slices, said it tasted exactly like she remembered. I didn't tell her it was my first time making it. I'd watched Miriam make it for 34 years, and apparently that was enough to learn something. Some things take longer than they should. The cooling. The learning. The understanding that quiet isn't the same as peace. That letting something pass isn't the same as letting it go. Roland had counted on me confusing those things. He'd counted on it for years. He was wrong about Miriam. He was wrong about Nadine. He was wrong about Nadine. That's not revenge. That's just the record being set straight. There's a difference. I'm still not entirely sure the difference always feels like it should, but I know it's there. And on the days when I'm not sure, I take out the recipe box. I read the handwriting. Small and precise, every detail exact. That's the real thing. I've thought a lot about what made Roland believe he could walk into my house and put his hands on me. And I think the honest answer is that he'd been testing the edges for years, and nobody had ever pushed back hard enough to cost him anything. Not really. Each time he borrowed money and didn't return it, each time he raised his voice or shifted the blame, the people around him absorbed it and moved on. That's how a man like Roland gets built. Not all at once, but slowly, one unanswered act at a time. I'm not saying I'm blameless in that. I let things go too. I told myself it was for Miriam, for Nadine, for the peace of family gatherings. But there's a version of patience that isn't patience at all. It's just avoidance wearing a calmer name. And avoidance has a price. It accumulates interest, the same way debt does, and eventually someone presents the bill in a way you can't ignore. For me, it was a shove into a doorframe with a bruised shoulder, and my wife's forged handwriting on pale blue stationery. What I've come to understand is that the moment I picked up the phone and called Bernard wasn't an act of revenge. It felt like one at first. I won't pretend otherwise. There was anger in it. Real anger. The kind you feel when someone disrespects not just you, but the memory of someone you loved. But anger alone doesn't hold up in a courtroom. And it doesn't hold up in your own chest for very long either. Not without burning you from the inside. What actually carried me through wasn't the anger. It was something quieter, The understanding that the truth had a shape, that it was documented and time-stamped and recorded, and that walking away from it would mean letting the false versions stand. I wasn't willing to do that. Nadine taught me something I didn't expect. She had lived inside Roland's pattern for 31 years. She'd watched things happen and frozen and stayed quiet, and she carried that weight in a way that was visible on her face by the end. And still she forwarded those emails. Still, she walked into that courtroom in her gray dress and said what she saw without softening it. That took more courage than most people will ever have to produce, because she wasn't just testifying against a stranger. She was testifying against the life she'd built, and she did it anyway, because the alternative was to keep watching and stay silent one more time. That's what I mean when I say this story is about intelligence, as much as it's about anything else. Not cleverness, not strategy, the kind of intelligence that knows the difference between what is comfortable and what is true, and chooses truth even when it costs something. Roland was clever. He was organized about his deceptions, careful about his timing, precise about who he targeted, but he wasn't intelligent in the way that actually matters. Because he never once considered that the people around him were keeping records too. That Nadine had been watching just as carefully as he had, that a retired neighbor in a charcoal blazer would show up to court and describe my face at the window with the plain accuracy of a man who spent 30 years delivering the truth to people's doors. What you do in the small moments, when no one seems to be watching, that's what builds the record. Roland built his, I built mine. The difference was only in what we'd chosen to put in it. I still take out Miriam's recipe box sometimes. I read her handwriting, the real thing, small and precise, and I think about the fact that he tried to copy it and couldn't quite get it right. You can approximate a lot of things. You can approximate kindness, patience, family loyalty, but you can't approximate 34 years of someone's actual character. That comes through. It always does. That's not a lesson anyone taught me. It's just what I've seen to be true.